Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Protect Assets and Safeguard Leases While Slowing Production. I'm Jenny Olvera and I will be hosting today's session. We have a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Today's session is being recorded and we will email the recording to everyone on today's call. Your line will be muted during the presentation, so if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box at the top right-hand side of the screen. We will address questions at the end of the presentation. We don't anticipate any issues, but if we happen upon a technical glitch and the session ends, please try logging back into the session. We will now pass things over to David to get us started.
All right, thank you very much, Jenny. As mentioned, my name is David Grisanti, and I'm a solutions consultant with P2 out of Denver. So I handle software demonstrations for a few of our solutions, particularly on the production side of things. And I've been with P2 for almost 7 years. Prior to that, I was a field engineer in West Texas. So I'm going to have Pam say hello next.
All right, thank you, David, and hello, everyone. I'm Pam Gaspar, Senior Solution Consultant at P2. I've been with P2 for many years and have worked with our customers in a variety of capacities. Currently, I meet with customers to understand their land system needs and demo our land solutions. Prior to this, I worked in services at P2, providing training, conversion, and implementation support for our land customers. I look forward to talking with you further today about the role of land, as well as become non-producing. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brandy Greek to introduce herself.
Good morning, good afternoon. I am Brandy Greek, a product manager here at P2. I've been with P2 for 5 years. My focus right now is on integrations and automation, but previously I spent years assisting our accounting customers from within our global customer support team. And I also spent time as an Excalibur end user, and I'm happy to be here today.
All right, thank you, Brandy and Pam. So let's kick this off. We'll just start with a quick discussion of the current environment. And as everyone knows, market conditions have forced oil and gas producers into making choices about curtailing production. The pandemic has certainly reduced demand, filled storage, even showed us a world of negative futures contracts. We've seen layoffs and really we've had business being less predictable. Everybody knows the price of oil around $41, but I found this chart interesting. This is a graph from the EIA of diesel and jet fuel sales over time. So if we just zoom in to the last 5 years here, we can see the monthly sales numbers, and they were pretty consistent, pretty steady up until the pandemic. And diesel dropped 20%, jet fuel dropped 50% just within a matter of a month. And as an upstream oil and gas company, there's only so many levers to pull when it comes to revenue and expenses. When prices are low, we're driven to look with a critical eye at our expenses and reduce those wherever we can. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. We saw a hint of what recovery might look like with the vaccine news, but we need to continue to focus on what's in our control. So today we're going to talk about how to maintain leases while slowing production and shutting in wells. All right, so what's our challenge? We need a lot of information from different places in order to make the right decisions on slowing production and shutting in wells. The information needs to be accurate, it needs to be as close to real time as possible, and essentially the idea is we need it to be trustworthy because there are consequences like losing a lease for wrong decisions. It can be difficult for decision makers to have all the information they need available to them so that they can make the optimal decision quickly about which wells to shut in. Here you can see an illustration where I've got data that, at times it's siloed, and that's what we're seeing here. Restricted by maybe access to applications or by latency in the data, maybe even by knowledge of the data itself. Maybe someone doesn't know how to get to exactly what they need. All these things that can cloud the decision-making process. You might be getting your information from spreadsheets, you might get it from multiple systems of record, or you might have a sophisticated reporting tool that can pull information into one place and provide a snapshot. Regardless of how you get to the information, it's important to have it and really important to have confidence in it. So at P2, we help our customers get the most out of their data. In this webinar, we're going to offer some ideas for managing and presenting important information that's critical to share among those decision makers. With that information, they'll have a full picture of operations, and they'll be able to make the right decision about where to curtail production in a smart way. The goal here is to put information together in a way that decision makers have everything they need in one place at one time. Reduce the iterative process of requesting information from separate systems of record, missing some key piece of data, having to take time generating the details as opposed to analyzing the results. If decision makers need more information, they need to get it quickly so they're basing their decisions on the best and most accurate information that they have available. Now I'm going to take you to an example of a dashboard. And this could be used to start the discussion about shutting in wells. On the left-hand side of this dashboard, you see a ranking of wells by profitability. And the dashboard's filtering for the 10 least profitable wells within our selection criteria, a certain date range, a certain area. On the right side of the dashboard, we can see our expenses over time, we can see spend by vendor, but looking again on the left side there at our least profitable wells, in this case, we can see they're all producing and they're all generating revenue over the time period that we have selected. I want to contrast that with a different set of wells, a different area. So in this case, our wells are losing money. We can see very obviously the 2 wells on the left are losing a lot of money. And even the second left-hand well, it's producing, but it's losing money. So this view could be a valuable starting point in deciding which wells warrant further investigation and might be candidates for shut-in. This is just an idea, something that kind of gets the gears moving for our discussion topics today. Now, I'm going to pass to Pam, who's going to talk about this from the land perspective.
All right, thank you, David. So David talked about the importance of ready access to information to support the decision-making process related to well production. So how can land help with this? Land knows the details of the agreements that are impacted by a non-producing well. The terms of the related agreements can affect well assets and related production decisions. Therefore, it's important to have the relevant information readily available, perhaps through a report, a dashboard, or even a map for wells that are down. You might even set a time parameter for this, such as the well must be down at least 5 or even 10 days, and include other details, such as related leases, wells, and lease terms. So this example includes leases impacted by wells that are down, and any other wells holding the lease. If there are no other wells holding the lease might be in jeopardy. So relevant lease terms, such as whether there's a shut-in clause or continuous operations requirements, whether or not it's within primary term, the number of days a well can be shut in before you have to start making payments. All of this factors into the decision-making process. So through such a report, it's easy to determine which assets require further action, either on land to ensure requirements such as a shut-in payment are met, or by production to get the well back online. Land helps to ensure that no leases are unintentionally lost as a result of not meeting requirements. Another way to look at wells down is through a map, filtering by the well status, in this case, wells that are down. Through the map, it's easy to see the status not only of the wells that are down, but also other nearby wells. And layers for additional lease information could also be included. So land determines the impact of leases on other agreements and keeping a well down long-term. Through reports and the map, it's easy to determine which assets require further action, either on land to ensure requirements such as a shut-in payment are met, or by production to get the well back online. There are typically financial implications either way. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brandy to discuss financial considerations.
Thanks, Pam. In my world, the world of accounting, the focus is on numbers, numbers, numbers. Before I can help make a decision on whether or not to shut in a well, I require seeing the trends on the well, those of cost and revenue. And I'm not looking for just the last 6 months, but I'd like to see at least the last 2 years. Did our revenue increase, decrease, or stay stagnant? And what about our costs? So a report like the one on the screen showing those trends is really going to be my bread and butter. Looking at this report, I can see our revenue has declined over time, while my costs have roughly stayed the same. If I use this report alone, I would advise to shut in the well until the prices go up and it becomes more profitable. However, I do have other things to consider. Thanks to Pam, I am also advised about any shut-in payments that may have to be made or other lease consequences that might happen depending upon our decision. And we can weigh the total of any of those payments against the total cost to keep the well operational. Another bit of information I'm researching so I can provide is from marketing, and that is if we will incur any penalties with our purchasers if the well is shut in. If there are penalties, I will of course need to calculate the total and consider that incurred cost before voicing my opinion on how best to handle this well. I would need to add up any shut-in payments and other penalties, then compare that to the cost. If the cost continues to be higher than those payments, I know which way I would be leaning. What I am looking to hear from production is if this well is truly tip-top shape. Are these trends accurate? Or is there a possibility we could see revenue increase with a workover? I want to make sure that swabbing the well is not an option that would raise our profits. If it turns out that in fact, this is not something that needs to happen, I feel good providing my report as well as my recommendation on this well based off the data I have at hand. If cleaning out the well to get rid of paraffin buildup had a high chance of increasing production, I would evaluate that option and run those numbers as well to help pick my path. I am again happy to supply my trend report to help all stakeholders make the best decision for my company. So I'll go ahead and see what David has to say from the world of production.
All right, thank you, Brandy. Pardon me. So now we're getting into the production discussion, and it's not just producing volumes or what volumes we've produced. It also needs to incorporate thinking about things like downtime, thinking about the costs that we've learned about from accounting and land, potentially even costs of maintaining that well as far as our lease operators going out to it on a recurring basis, things like that. Forecasts are going to be part of that. And then we even need to think in the back of our mind about net interest. You know, if our net interest is low and we're in jeopardy of losing the lease, we might be fine with letting the lease expire, especially if we could potentially release it down the road. But if our net interest is high in that particular well, then it's a different story. So Brandy's performed the analysis from the accounting perspective, and we need that input from our production engineer and even from the field operator, who in many cases know everything about the wells they manage. In the same way that somebody knows every sound coming out of their classic car, or a new parent knows every sound that they hear out of their baby's nursery. Let's take a look. Here we have a visualization from our production system of record where we can see well performance measured against a moving average. In this case, I'm looking at it against a 60-day moving average. So the large boxes in our tree map show the higher producers. Red shows a substantial drop from our moving average, and green shows an increase from our moving average. Like I mentioned, ideally the field operator's attention to detail is recorded in a system of record for those who are not as familiar with the well to see. Information like commentary or alerts or cases that are identifying actions taken to rectify issues give a rich history about the life of the well and whether it's a candidate for shut-in or one that we should invest in keeping online. Here we can see an example of that level of detail. We can see our production trends over time. So we know that that well was producing less based on the fact that it was showing up in red, but now we see the specifics of oil and gas production over time. We can see in the top blue and gray shading how long that well has been down. So it's been down for a period of 5 or 6 days already. And then we can see the rich history of detail as far as what our field operator has captured in terms of notes and comments and shut-in details on the bottom left, where they're capturing that this well is shut in for buildup. So from that, to borrow a word from Stephen Covey in the Seven Habits book, we can bring the information that we have from our experts in each domain together so that the results are greater than the sum of each part. Now, we discussed with Pam and Land how downtime is an example of a critical piece of information which they depend on the production team to provide and maintain as accurately as possible. Operations will rely on Land when factoring in the cost of maybe changing a drilling plan to cut capital expenditures. You know, what is the amount of savings going to be when we factor in paying penalties to hold a lease for a continuous drilling obligation? Production is going to rely on Land and accounting when it comes to ensuring that any wells we do want to shut in are not critical to holding a lease, wouldn't incur a large shut-in or marketing penalty. So the best way to accurately manage this information from these different sources, as we alluded to earlier, is to ensure it is presented to a decision-making team that includes representation from those different areas. This could be information where the decision makers share a report that includes all the necessary details for one person to approve, or it could be more rigorous where we route the information for electronic approval. Here's an example of how we're taking that critical information from different domains and breaking down the information silos so it flows to the decision makers who need it. This is the same report Pam showed us earlier that Land relies on, but now we've included a layer onto this that's color-coded through conditional formatting to provide context around each well's production status. Shut-in wells show up in red and producing wells show up in green. So we know if the whole column looks red there, the other wells on this lease are shut in and we need to proceed with caution, as this well could incur a penalty if it also gets shut in. This is layering in that detail of production data on top of the Land report that Pam was referencing and using to make her decision. As I mentioned, taking a more rigorous approach, we could create a workflow as part of the business process. The workflow could ensure that the decision-making approvals are handled appropriately and documented. Or going one step further, our workflow could assist in aggregating the critical information that each domain provides. In this case, we can see how our workflow steps through the domains and gathers the required information for the well in question. That information is combined and then displayed on a form, which we can see for convenience of our approvers and our decision makers to review all in one place. So we'll take a look at that form next, but you can see here is an example of that workflow where we're going through the data aggregation process. We're going to display it for our approvers, and then we go through that approval process. If we were to dive into the details of a form, here's what that would look like. This is a form that incorporates panels showing the details from each domain. So by presenting the information in this way, we're solving the challenges our decision makers were facing. The important information is presented for them. The access is one stop, and the full detail is here. There's no latency in needing to hunt down missing information. They can spend all of their time, their valuable time, on analysis as opposed to chasing down missing details. For a given well, we can view all the critical information in one place and rest assured that we have all the information we need to make the right shut-in decisions. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation and I'll open it up for question and answer.
Alrighty, thank you all so far. If there's any questions, just as a reminder, you can submit any questions via the Q&A tab at the top right-hand side of your screen. For now, I did have a couple of questions that came in earlier. So how do you bring the information together from different sources? Sorry, David, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Sorry about that. So bringing the information together from different sources, different companies, their setups are going to be different. So one way to do that would be bringing that information together as far as in a report through your queries for that report. So from your different databases. Another way, maybe simpler, is a lot of times these things like wells have a shared key value between different systems, and that might be as simple as like an API number. Maybe you'd say an API number isn't that simple because different API numbers have different lengths of digits and things like that, but a lot of times there is that sort of information where there can be a shared key that's stored in a system and the same across different systems, and we could use a key like that, reference that key across our different systems to bring information into one place for everybody to view conveniently.
Okay, thank you. The other one here, what is the best way to notify other departments when these types of decisions have to be made?
Sure. I guess I'm thinking of a couple ways to do that. Commonly, we rely on email as a notification. Maybe taking that a step further in the direction of convenience and automation, we could rely on automated emails going to people to let them know that they need to look at something. So, in a lot of reporting systems, you can create automated emails, you can create scheduled emails. So potentially your decision-making team has a recurring meeting where they look at this kind of thing. Whether they do or don't, you could set up scheduled automated alerts to let them know when it's time to take a look at, potentially certain fields, certain set of wells, things like that.
Okay, thank you. One more here that's come in. Is there a minimum production volume that satisfies holding a lease? I think it's a two-part question. If your leasehold well is cash flow negative, as you showed, is that considered paying quantities?
So, good question there. I'm not sure if Pam, you might know the answer to that from the land side. And if not, we can take that as a follow-up, certainly.
Yes, let's go ahead and take that as a follow-up. But it really just depends on the term, and what is considered paying quantities.
Yeah, I could imagine that might be different based on different areas.
Right.
And so far, I've got just one more. Are you all using the same reporting tool?
So in this case, we do have our systems of record connected to the same reporting tool, and that's one way to display this and represent the data for everybody. In the last slide I showed, that was actually using different actual systems of record and displaying their details within a panel in a workflow. So in that case, it didn't actually use a common reporting tool. It was just grabbing the relevant information from different places and displaying it together. But for example, Pam's report, the land report, and Brandy's report, where we were looking at revenue and expenses, that was all coming from a common reporting tool. Yes.
Alrighty, thank you. I don't see any questions just yet. Oh wait, here we've got one more. Is there a follow-up email we can send more complicated questions to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have that detail here on the next slide. But we can also share our emails, I'm sure, here at the end and take any follow-up questions.
Okay. And just one more reminder, you can submit your questions via the Q&A tab at the top right-hand side of your screen. If there's any more questions, we can give it just a couple of seconds here. Okay, I don't see anything come through. Do I have anything else before we wrap it up?
No, thank you very much for hosting, Jenny.
Sure thing. Alrighty, well, we appreciate everything that our team has provided so far, and we thank you all that have attended today's webinar. So this now concludes the session.